Good morning. This is PJ. I'm here in my office before church on Sunday, January 5th, 2025. I am going to be reading our gospel reading and preaching the sermon that we will be hearing in church a little bit later. The gospel reading, John chapter 1, verses 1 through 18. The Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being? In him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who was born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he who I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me.' From his fullness we all have received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, himself God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." The word of the Lord. With it being the first Sunday of the new year, I believe that the text is a very fitting text. We ourselves can ponder to whom and for what will we listen to in this upcoming year. There were a few words that spoke to me this week as I read the scriptures, prayed through the text, and then sat and contemplated what I wanted to share with you. One of the first words that rose to the top was the word redemption. John chapter 1 can be seen as a redemptive text. It shares with us how the Word became flesh and how the Word is a redemptive act. Individuals have shared how John 1 can become an elevator speech. In the business world, we hear about individuals needing and preparing their elevator speech so that they can pitch their thoughts or ideas. We as Christians do not normally have an elevator speech to talk about God, especially us Lutherans. However, if you would reread John 1, you can easily imagine a bare bones approach about our God and our religion. The image of the Word becoming flesh can begin to be the first brushstroke on the canvas that paints the picture that we have the possibility to not only know God, but to live in God. And when we know and live in God, we have the possibility to experience heaven in the midst of this chaotic world. Those words and conversations and living into that reality is difficult and tough to even comprehend, because we have done a great job of separating earth as being here and heaven being somewhere out there. The prologue of John does 4 things for us. Yes, it reveals the identity of Jesus, and It establishes the authority of Jesus, but it also introduces us to this amazing truth that the work of Jesus is revealing God to us. Then finally, it does help us uncover a disconnect between heaven and earth. John 1 truly does teach us that we can experience heaven on earth. When I was in high school, Belinda Carlisle was singing Heaven is a Place on Earth. Now, she was not referencing the truth of John 1 in her song, but the phrase is very applicable to our sense of reality that is possible. Yet, I don't imagine that most of us believe we experience that type of reality. But that is one of the aspects of God's redemptive story that we can hold on to. If you are listening in closely to all of our 4 scriptures today, you may have noticed that each one of them spoke to the theme of God acting in a redemptive way. There was another word that spoke out to me this week, and that word was hope. Maybe it's because we have just traveled through Advent, and during Advent, hope is a key theme. I think, though, that we throw the word hope out there, and we all have different definitions. Words can be tricky. For John, hope is the trust that the light does indeed overcome darkness. When I heard that definition, I was reminded of a colleague who snapped a picture of a bumper sticker that spoke to him after he had presided over a tough funeral. The bumper sticker was a quote from a musician: "Gotta kick out the darkness till it bleeds daylight." Over the last few weeks, that song lyric means a lot. Now, here is the thing. For us as Christians, we do not place the hope in ourselves because of who we are or the abilities or talents that we have to get us out of a pickle. Our hope is rooted in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, not us. That is why it is so vital that we take the spotlight off of ourselves and we turn that spotlight to Jesus. God has declared victory. God has claimed victory in life over death. God has declared victory with light over darkness, and that is why we can have hope. But hope is tough to come by. It is tough for us inside the church, but it is nearly impossible for those outside the walls of the church. Our world today, overall, is very pessimistic. If you paid attention to the news this week, it has been littered with bad news. Many of us find ourselves disapproving what we are seeing and hearing in our culture, and we might have become dismayed. I think that is why many individuals have given up on institutions. They distrust them. They don't believe that they have the ability to chart a future of promise. And I can understand that. When I think of what happened in New Orleans and Las Vegas and the current battles that Russia and the surrounding areas are still engaged in, I just give a deep sigh. Then, many individuals are worried about environmental concerns, and both aisles of the political sphere look at Washington, D.C., and all they see is political chaos and dysfunction. We throw up our hands and we declare all hope is gone. But what if we hold on to optimism instead? We, as a nation, are also not too far off from MLK Jr. weekend. In one of his sermons, King said, "The moral arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice." We can cling to hope and be optimistic because we know what God has done, what God is doing, and what God shall do. So what can we do? We can be like John the Baptist. We might not have all the answers. We may not be able to explain everything clearly, but we can point to Jesus. Jesus is at the center. He is the Word. John the Baptist was not the light, but he knew who the light was, and he bore witness to that light. Will you be willing to bear witness to the resurrected Christ? As we move through 2025, I imagine that we as a church will be doing many good things, but I want to throw out a cautionary tale for us. At times, churches and ministries can turn me-centric. Faith is something to make me happier. The ministry that Bayview provides fulfills me. Prayer gives me direction. Worship gives me peace. John, in a gracious way, moves away from that mindset. He is continually pointing away from himself and pointing to the one, Jesus, who is at the center. And this is what we can do as a church and as individuals. It can be very liberating if we step out of the spotlight. We point to the Logos. It is not about the great things that Bayview does or the great ministries that we do as individuals in this community. It is not about me, you, or us as a community. Instead, it truly is about Jesus. When we depart from this holy space and step into the world, I truly hope and pray that each and every one of us will find ways to take the spotlight off of us, and we will point it to Jesus, the one who has provided us redemption and has given us the freedom to point towards him. Amen.